Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in just a moment. We're going to allow a few more people into the room, and then we'll get started with today's webinar. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today for the More Mobility, Stronger Connections Using Transactional Data Specifications Part 2 webinar by NADTC and AARP. I'm Heather Edmonds, Program Associate with the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. We held Part 1 of this webinar on May 4th, and that recording is available on our website, nadtc.org. And before we get started, I will quickly go through our agenda for today. After a welcome and logistics, we'll have an NADTC overview with Melissa Gray, Senior Program Manager with the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. And then we'll have a TDS webinar overview and then a webinar 1 overview, and then we will have our panel discussion. And I'll go over a few logistics for today's webinar. All participants are muted. The session is being recorded and will be sent via email along with slides and our evaluation. And all materials will be put on our website, NADTC's website. We do have closed captioning available today. You can turn captioning on and off by clicking on the CC button, and you have to click Show Subtitles for that feature. Also, if you prefer streaming text, that link will be put in the chat box for you. Questions should be entered into the Q&A box, and please remember to not submit questions in the chat box, but the chat box is open for general comments or technical assistance. And now I'll return things over to Melissa Gray.
Thank you so much, Heather, and good afternoon to some and good morning to others. As Heather mentioned, my name is Melissa Gray. I'm the Senior Program Manager with the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes for those who may not be familiar with who we are and what our center is all about. We are one of 5 technical assistance centers funded by the Federal Transit Administration. And our overarching mission is to promote the availability of accessible transportation options that serve the needs of older adults, people with disabilities, caregivers, and the communities in which they live. Just a few of our major and key objectives that we run out of our center. We have a person-centered technical assistance and information center that is an 800 number, and also an email address where professionals in the field can call us, can email us about any questions they have related to transportation, from volunteer transportation, from on-demand transportation, from starting a transportation program. We do have a full-time TA associate on staff to answer all of those questions and address all of those needs. We also do a number of trainings. For example, today's webinar is one of the trainings, a type of training that we conduct throughout our center. And these trainings can range from webinars to online courses. We do a variety of communication and outreach through our social media channels, as well as our monthly e-news. And we also put out a number of e-alerts throughout the month as well. Coordination and partnership is a big part of our center, as well as we partner with organizations just like AARP for this particular webinar and others, so that we can get information and assistance out to those who are working in the field of transportation. And then lastly, we invest in community solutions, primarily through our annual grant program, where we will invest in communities that are looking for innovative ways to provide transportation options for older adults and persons with disabilities in their communities. And so we've got a lot going on. Our website is www.nadtc.org. So we invite you to visit us, sign up for our monthly e-newsletters, and we are looking forward to connecting with each and every one of you. So at this time, I do want to turn things over to Jana Lynott. She's a Senior Strategic Policy Advisor with AARP Public Policy Institute, and she's going to provide a brief overview of the webinar that we held on a Tuesday.
So thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you to NADTC for hosting these webinars and really helping get the word out on this new tool, Ridesheet, as well as the new data specification, the transactional data specification for demand responsive transportation. And that's something that sounds really wonky, and it is, but it really has the potential to enable us to be able to greatly improve the efficiency and quality of demand responsive transportation services in the United States. So it's also the transactional data spec is a key building block to our being able to ensure that non-drivers who rely on demand responsive services, either because of age, disability, rural residency, or any other reason, are able to take advantage of the emerging new mobility ecosystems. And often these are referred to as mobility as a service, but essentially what many folks out there are trying to build is an easy way for customers to understand what their different trip options are. They'd be able to schedule a trip, transfer modes, pay for travel, all within the same system. And it's really, in its ideal form, will be an ecosystem where all travel options are bundled together to serve the entire community, including those who have special needs. And improving demand responsive transportation coordination, as well as ensuring that these types of services are part of the new mobility future, is all going to be dependent on what are called data standards. And the transactional data specification is a preliminary data standard for the demand responsive transportation sector. So just to recap, Tuesday's webinar, just a little bit, which really focused in on describing what that is in more detail and offering up a case study of kind of the world's best demand responsive coordinated transportation system, which is in Denmark. Just to give you a little overview of what this transactional data spec is, it's simply computer code that establishes a clearly defined format for the data about a trip. So the format for the pickup address, the drop-off location, appointment time, whether the individual has any special needs, uses a wheelchair, etc. And that format, when all of the different providers and their software systems put their data about the trip into that format, then it allows the ride scheduling software systems that they use to interpret and act on that information. And in this way, that trip data can be electronically and automatically shared among providers in a network, even if they use different ride scheduling software packages. So this is the specification or data standard. It is applicable for very sophisticated software systems such as Route Match, Trapeze, Ecolane, as well as can be used with much simpler systems, as we'll learn today. And Ridesheet is a new software package that it is just that. It's a much simpler way of exchanging trip information and scheduling trips so that folks from nonprofits that are running smaller systems really have access to the technology as well. So Ridesheet, this is something that AARP put a bit of an investment in this past year. And why we did this is that we really had twofold goals. One is we wanted to create an open source, kind of publicly available software that is more applicable for smaller rural nonprofit providers who really get priced out and find that the existing off-the-shelf software packages are too sophisticated for their needs, and it just requires too much effort to keep those going. But probably the more important reason that we invested in this proof of concept was just that. It's a proof of concept of this transactional data specification. And it's something that AARP really feels strongly is one of the best ways that we can really improve services that we provide to older adults, people with disabilities, those living in rural areas, et cetera. So it's my pleasure to turn it back to Melissa, who will introduce our panel of folks who have actually implemented this new tool. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jana, for that. And it is my pleasure as well to introduce this wonderful group of individuals in Lake County, Oregon. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that you could see their lovely faces. And as Jana mentioned, this panel is going to be discussing Ridesheet, rural transportation benefits from new coordination technology. And it's my pleasure first to introduce Kevin Chambers, who is the founder and principal with Full Path Transit Technology. Next, we have Melissa, or better known as Missy Walton. She is the business manager at Intercourt Family Center. We have Linda Mickle, transportation program manager with the Lake County Senior Center Association. And last but certainly not least, we have Andrea Weisart, executive director with the Lake County Senior Center Association. So welcome to our illustrious panel. Good afternoon. All right. So I'm going to start off with a line of questions for you, Kevin, if you don't mind. The first question that I do have is, what is Ridesheet? Can you just give the audience an overview of that?
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Melissa. I would say at its most basic, Ridesheet is just a very specifically designed set of spreadsheets. You know, it's using the online version of spreadsheets that's available through the Google Workspace platform. So it's called Google Sheets, but really at its heart, it's a bunch of spreadsheets. So there's two things that kind of make Ridesheet particular to this this use. One is its design. So there's different tabs set up for different particular uses and stages of information. And then behind the scenes, there's programming code that is part of the Google Workspace environment. They provide a programming environment called Google Apps Script, or GAS or GAS. And so Google Apps Script allows the programming of behind the scenes. So as things are happening in the worksheet, when data is getting updated or when particular tasks need to happen, you can basically program data to move around, to reach out to other websites and fetch information, to offer information to others through an API that Google allows. And really the upshot at the end of that, adding all these things together between the special design and the programmability, is you get a secure mini app and that's a really sweet spot, I think, for small rural transportation where we want to carry out this coordination, because it's small, it's accessible, it's in a sort of a technology metaphor that people can grasp easily, because most people know spreadsheets, at least at some degree. It's secure. Google will even sign business associate agreements for HIPAA, and the programmability allows for adding a lot of features. For example, integrations with Google Maps, integrations between independent Ridesheet instances, which is kind of where the coordination comes in. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you. Well, you touched on the security of the platform and kind of the viability of this option. Could you also talk about the cost of this software to nonprofits that may be interested in implementing it?
Yeah, so first of all, I would call this not a product yet, but rather a project. So we are still at the early stages. The rest of the illustrious panel have been very generous guinea pigs for this project of sort of learning how to apply this technology in the real world and get it working for them. So there's definitely cost to learning that and becoming part of that process. And I think we're still at that stage that this is not something that is slick. You download it or you link to it and you're done. There's still a lot of learning to do. So that's a price to pay. In terms of the software itself, it is open source. So that was part of the project with AARP, is that all the code behind the scenes would be released under an open source license. And so that is true. So anyone who wants to pick up that software or that code or the design of the spreadsheets can do that. So there's no cost there, but it's still what I would call at a sort of embryonic stage. And one of the reasons I really think Ridesheet is a viable tool is because it's so easy to do that testing, because it's such a sort of a flexible platform.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned, it's still in kind of project phase versus the product phase, and we heard Jana talk a little bit about the AARP investment in this project. Could you tell me, kind of from your own perspective, how did the pilot project with Lake County come about with you and with Full Path? And
yeah, there's a few different stages. One is the state of Oregon, the Oregon Department of Transportation supported a number of assessments around the state for small transportation providers. And my company, Full Path, did an assessment of Lake County. They had tried some technology and had it not really work out. And so, in my assessment, I said, really, if you want something to work, you should start small and build up. And so I actually recommended working with spreadsheets, and I didn't recommend Google Sheets particularly, but just like start with the technology that you can most easily work with and then build up. And then concurrently, I was doing a project in another state with a very similar agency, and they had put something together with Excel and Outlook, and they're like, why aren't there just better tools for just doing this using things we already have? And that's when the light bulb went off. I'm like, we can do that. And I started looking deeper into Google Sheets and what some of the tools available are. And I realized that we could actually have this kind of connectivity between these very base level tools and get some of the wins that we really want around coordination. So that was the combination. That's when I've been working with ARP around this data standard for a while, and we were talking about, well, how do we advance the standard? And that's when I came to ARP and said, I think this is a way to do it. Not just needing to talk with the large software vendors, which also needs to happen, but also just starting small at an approachable level where we really get to experiment and see how things can be applied in the real world, in these incremental stages.
great. We're going to get to Lake County in a few minutes. I'm trying to hit Kevin with all the heavy technology questions at the top. So you mentioned again ARP and the data set. Can you discuss the Ridesheet technology in relation to the transactional data specification?
Well, one of the amazing things about Google Sheets is that it's sort of designed around the web world we live in. So, original spreadsheets, Lotus 1, 2, 3 and Excel were really built around, you have these files, they sit on your hard drive, and, they're fairly isolated approaches to managing data. Google Sheets has this sort of this app scripts behind it, and one of the things that you can do is you can trigger a call out to any really external data source, a website, an API, and just fetch that data and then pull that into your spreadsheet. So that's cool, and we use that in Ridesheet for example, to integrate with Google Maps. So anytime an address is entered, we check that address to make sure it's one that we can geolocate. We can actually assign a latitude and longitude to that address. And if it's not, something goes back to the user and says, this can't quite sort this out. So that's one example. The other thing which makes Google Sheets kind of exceptional for me, and I didn't realize until I did the research, is that it can also serve as an endpoint so that other services can tap into any Google Sheet and say, hey, I have some stuff I want. Can you respond? And the Google Sheet will just act as an always on, again, mini application. And you can program to say, yeah, I have some data for you. Here you go. And so then you can get this sort of peer-to-peer relationship between multiple Google Sheets or other services where they're talking to each other. And when you do that with the addition of robust authentication and security, so that not just anybody can see what your data is, then you can get these networks of small services talking to one another, and the mechanism for that communication is the TDS, is using that data standard. So now we haven't set that fully in place with the agencies yet. We've been working a lot on the internal systems, making sure that their reporting works, that their sort of internal wiring works, so that when we plug in the connection between the agencies, that it actually has places to go and actually fits into their workflows. That's a really critical element to this. That is, it's, you know, for a long time we've had sort of tin cans with strings between places. You know, it's not just the communication, is that the communication has a really clear and actionable place to go once it reaches either end of the string. And so that's pretty well established now. And so now we're going to be actually moving water, you know, I'm mixing my metaphors a lot, you know, moving water through the pipes. We're going to actually have, you know, people talking on either ends of those tin cans so that it can flow into their operations smoothly.
Well, thank you. I'm going to kind of transition and, you know, we talked about clear and actionable. So I want to hear from the folks over at Lake County to see how clear and actionable it's been so far with you all. So actually the first question I would like to ask, and, you know, any of you all of you all could certainly address any of the questions that I pose. So I'm interested to know what were some of the challenges, for instance, service coordination, missed rides, lack of flexibility that motivated you to give Ridesheet a try?
Well, I can speak of that if you'd like. And thank you for having us. One of the challenges that we found and worked with for a long time were sticky notes and scraps of paper. When rides would come in, someone grabbed the phone and they'd jot down the note really quick. Then you have the coordinator who's going to try to interpret this note, and we have the challenge of handwriting, we have the challenge of AM, PM, we have all these challenges. So what Ridesheet has done for us is it has allowed a clear and concise, at a glance look at a drive and a ride. It can it has eliminated text messages and communication with the drivers of, oh, this has changed, you know, it's not 2 o'clock, it's 4 o'clock now. And you just simply change it in your ride sheet and send off another notice. You don't have to have the cumbersome and time-consuming chat with that driver. So collectively, the information as a whole is imperative to time management and efficiency and getting the people where they need to go. So that's what's really helped us. It has helped us just get all the information in one good spot, and then from there we can manipulate that, but at least it's in one spot.
Thanks, Linda. Anything additional to add, Missy, from your perspective over at Intercourt?
I do. Ours is a little bit different. We still kind of use the tin can and the string every now and then. We don't have any employees. All we have are volunteers, and they drive their own vehicles. And a lot of our drivers are retired seniors, and they are not comfortable with technology. So that's been a big challenge for us. It has been a huge saving grace for us in that Deanna and I, my dispatcher up north, we can share information, and eventually we'll be sharing with Lake County too, the senior center. That'll be awesome. We can share information. We don't have to worry about it getting lost in between, or, you know, not being able to hand it off or anything like that. Some of our drivers, in the sharing of information, like I said, they're not really comfortable with technology. We can get some of them to take pictures and send us pictures of their little paper that they've written on. Some will input it into a Excel sheet and send it to us, but we're working on growing still. So
No, absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely. And so that kind of leads me to my next question in terms of, just with, you know, still using kind of the tin cans and the string analogy. So in your opinion, and this is for the full panel, how can Ridesheet benefit smaller, more rural providers? And I don't know, Kevin, if you want to get into the geography of Lake County really quickly and kind of give the audience an idea of where these ladies sit. And
Yeah, let me, why don't you throw up that slide. So
yeah.
in the background here, I have one of the photos I took when I visited Lake County in 2019. It's an incredibly beautiful area, and it's really kind of big sky country. It's just really, yeah. So there's a view. Go back a couple, and we'll
Okay.
give some geographic context.
Sure.
Let's see, one more. There we go. So there's Lake County in Oregon, and just to give a comparison, so Lake County is just a hair smaller by land area than Massachusetts. So and it with a population of about 8,000 people across the entire county. Most of those people are in the southern part. Go to the next slide there, and you'll see. So Lakeview shows up there at the bottom. That's the county seat and where most people live. And then you've got people living in Paisley. So so Andrea and Linda are down in Lakeview. Missy is in Paisley, which is right kind of smack in the middle there. And then there's communities in Summer Lake, Silver Lake, Christmas Valley, and Fort Rock. And the distance to get from the California border up to the border near Fort Rock there is, I believe, like 2.25 hours, something like that, in good weather. Feel free to correct me, team, on that. So the distances are large. The every trip, the raw numbers of trips are not great. But each trip is extremely valuable. It's costly just from us, just like how much it is to get somebody to care, to get somebody to a medical appointment in Bend or Klamath Falls in neighboring counties is just, it's a major endeavor. It's a major commitment of driver time, vehicle miles, gas. And so any opportunity for coordination between any organizations, not just the senior center and inner court, but any organizations to share resources just brings tremendous value. So that's why there's so much interest in this and why we want to dial in what's going on within those organizations and then get those systems aligned and then connect them so that they can share resources. There's just so much value to it. So I'll stop there.
I'd like to add, Melissa, that our in order to serve our population, both North County and Lakeview proper, it's at least 100 miles to travel to any town that has a specialty doctor or testing or dental work, even eye clinics. So our population, as of, I think it wasn't the 2020 census, but 2010 census, puts our population at over 25% as being over 65 years old. So therefore we have a need for medical. We have a need for transportation because oftentimes they're not comfortable driving the distance. They'll drive around town and have their cars in good working order, but taking a trip can be daunting for a senior. So winter times, we have definitely the 4 seasons in Lake County. We have severe winters. We have our elevation, it's in our town is 5,000 feet. We're the Mile High City. So when you see that snow is coming at 2,500 or 3,000 feet, you can pretty well guess we've got double that because we're up in the sky. So just to let you know, that's part of the uniqueness to the Oregon High Desert is that we have extreme weather. We're very cattle oriented. There's a lot of cattle drives. We get behind cattle drives. It looks like Kevin took a picture of one of our few paved transportation roads, especially in North County. There's not very many up there that are paved. So that adds to time. It adds to time. It adds to scheduling, time correctly to get people not only to their house, you've gone miles to get to their house, then you get to their road, and then you've got a mile or two of driveway, and then to get them to their appointments on time. So Ridesheet has really helped us with that as well, because we can, Google Maps will tell you from this to this, but they're not going to tell you about the potholes or the problems with the road. So we can manipulate that, and we can put that manipulation in a note in that customer's file, if you please, and to say we need to add a half hour to pickup and delivery. So that's really helpful. It's not just in the head or in a file somewhere. We've got it right there. So Ridesheet's helped with that extremely much.
Would like to add to that?
I would. Up in Christmas Valley, there in Fort Rock, there are a lot of places that Kevin is talking about Google Maps. There are a lot of places that don't have, they can give us a physical address, but our navigator's not going to find it. So we have to do the plus code that he was talking about. And my dispatcher up there, she'll go up and pin an address, pin a house, and we can share it with Linda or with our drivers, and we can find that place. I guess we're called rural outback, correct? We
Yes.
are very
Highly.
Petra up north lives 62 miles from me, one way.
Yeah.
So an example, there's a lady that we have to pick up, and she lives, maybe 5 miles from the pavement. And it is a 45-minute trip, and you have to take a 4-wheel drive because it's all bug dust and you're going to get stuck. And that's in the good time, in the summer. So
yeah,
it presents lots of challenges. And this has helped because it's so much easier to find. And we can pin that address and send it to the drivers that will use it and get them where they need to be.
Yeah, I could jump in a little bit more on the plus codes because it's an interesting example of adapting technology to the rural context. So, a lot of software is designed for urban, large or small urban environments, and the geocoding of addresses is quite good, in towns. And then you get to rural highways, and at least for Google, which is the tool we're using, the geolocating is often awful. just terrible. Either it can't find it at all, or it's miles off. And so, but our saving grace with that has been discovering that Google has a way of encoding latitude and longitude in a short code. They call them plus codes. It's an open source way of encoding locations. And so now we use that and we embed that in the addresses in Ridesheet when they're needed. And so that allows both a number of things to happen. It allows the estimating of travel time and distance to stay accurate. And then when it's time to pass a particular trip on to the driver, they in the manifest, they can get a link to that that uses that plus code so that they can go right to the right driveway, right? Rather than, somewhere on the road within a mile or something like that, which, it's not so helpful. And we're having to do, I'll just add, we're having to do a lot of things like that. There's a lot of just figuring things out. We was like, oh, this doesn't work for the rural context. And then we address it. And I don't think we're done. We're still in that kind of figuring it out phase.
So a question, I guess, directly actually to Andrea. So I know you're the ED over at the Senior Center. I don't know how heavily involved you are with the transportation program, because I know Linda is your transportation manager. So I guess from the executive standpoint, could you give your perspective on Ridesheet, how, you see it being, implemented and kind of, easing some of the challenges for the organization overall? We may have some organizational leaders that may not be, day-to-day in transportation, but would want to know, like, as an executive director or CEO, why should I consider something like this?
Well, I think initially what interested me most was the accuracy of reporting. We had been using a longhand drawn out method, and with we're actually using the software now to do our reporting. We have a number of different funders, and it's really quite complicated. Even though we're small, our this piece is quite complicated. So I like that aspect of it. It's very streamlined, it's efficient, but also it's brought a new level of awareness to what we're actually doing, to the length of times that trips take. And we're thinking, okay, you're going to drive here to there, not factoring in, the length of an appointment or the conditions of the road, or, all of the stuff. That time is money. And it is just kind of, wow, opened it up that we're able to bill much more efficiently. And we just got a real much improved grasp on our financial piece to the transportation. So that has been wonderful.
That's great. And Missy, you as well over at Intercourt, I know you're the business manager there. How is this kind of heightened, as Andrea talked about, just operations, and reporting, and are there any types of she mentioned grants and funding requirements and compliance? Is this software, is this project helping at all in that capacity?
It
From the
is.
business
It's
standpoint.
helping a lot. We only have the one line of funding, just the $5310. So that doesn't, on our end, I should say, with the volunteers, we don't have to worry too much about time, because they're volunteers. I mean, we worry about time, of course, but they're not an employee. They don't have 8 hours to their day. If we tell them there's a trip to Portland and they can't do it time-wise, then they don't take it, and we find someone else. But for the reporting, we were really struggling because that 124 miles right there between Deanna and I in one trip. So having it on this system, we can pull all the records off that we need. I pull all the records off that I need and do the reporting for the county and to the county. And it has helped streamline everything a lot. It's been a blessing.
Wonderful.
One thing I'll add a little bit about on the reporting side. So, I think the senior centers situation is interesting because it's, you get this picture of like, oh, it's a small program. They've just, fewer than 10 vehicles, not that, the trips tend to be really long. So it's not that many trips, but the senior center has half a dozen different funders, and nobody wants to pay for anybody else's trip. So the cost allocation model, for those who are familiar with that term, is just as complex as an organization, 10 times its size. So one thing that we did for the reporting side is we set up, and this is where Google Maps has been really effective, is we were able to sort of set up synthetic trips of like, if this person just went by themselves, what would have been the distance and time for that, and then use that to sort of prorate out joint trips. So if you have multiple butts in seats from different funders, we have a clear and defensible methodology for allocating costs per funding source. That is took some time to set up, but it doesn't require either Andrea or Linda to pull out their hair at the end of every month. They can look at it, they can interrogate it, they can see where the numbers come from, they can see the calculations, and it's and they can have more funders. So now that the system is set up, they're set up to both grow, both in terms of number of funders and number of trips without melting down. And then, and similar for Melissa, Melissa just has the one funding stream, or Missy, I should say, but they're poised to grow. If they want to bring in more funding sources, they could do that because the tools are there now.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. And thanks for expounding on that, Kevin, because I know for any organization, reporting could be a bear in any sense of the word. So you touched a little bit about this earlier on, Kevin, in terms of just, how the platform and the software is secure, but could you kind of expound a little bit more on data security and privacy and safety?
Yeah, it's a big topic. And I think it's one of the things that Ridesheet alone can't solve. Google Workspace alone cannot solve. One of the things we did as part of the project is we pulled in a HIPAA expert, Chris Apgar, who is based here out of Portland, where I live. And he put together a set of tools for the organization so they could look at how to manage security, both in terms of Google Workspace, but in terms of everything, in terms of, policies, procedures, bringing in, connection to other technology, how the drivers should manage technology when they're in the, or the information on the vehicle. And it's something that Ridesheet is part of that larger data security solution. So one of the things, and I'll just use security as an example of like why coordination is so hard, because it's not just that it's just not the tin cans with a string between them. You're solving multiple problems all at the same time. You're walking, you're chewing gum, and you're juggling, and you're balancing a jug of water on your head. And I think that's why I have really think Ridesheet is viable, because it can be one of the things that flexes as you're figuring all these other things out. And it's not everything, because I think often you get this kind of catch-22 problem where like, well, coordination is hard, and if the technology is as hard or harder as the sort of non-technical institutional coordination you need to do, it never happens. It's just too overwhelming. So yeah, I don't want to oversell Ridesheet security. It is secure for the thing it does, but it doesn't mean all your boxes are checked for security. You need to address the other things, and implementing Ridesheet should be part of a larger data security plan. I think we've done that well, and it's an ongoing process.
I know just kind of in our kind of planning calls, we talked a little bit about this, and I know that the Lake County is a rural, would you call it a rural outback area?
I've heard the term frontier. Is often
Frontier,
used.
yeah. But I'm sure we've got all types of geographies on the call. So how do you see, Ridesheet? It's working, it's in process of working here in the rural state. Talk about a little bit about why you feel it would work the same or maybe even better in an urban or a suburban or area as well. How can that kind of be transferred or adapted there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple scenarios. So one is it's not necessarily rural and urban so much as small. So I think when you have a number of small entities that want to connect, even if it's in an urban context. So, imagine pulling together a number of social service agencies, maybe other sort of community organizations, churches or other sort of faith-based services that are maybe want to connect. As long as you can get sort of the contractual things dialed in, right? Ridesheet could be a good tool for that. The other scenario that I see is testing. So if you have larger services where Ridesheet isn't going to be an ongoing solution because it's not going to be able to sustain 100 rides a day or a dozen, more than I say a dozen vehicles. You can set up the testing for like, well, how's this coordination going to work? And you could use it as a flexible proof of concept tool, get the communication between systems set up in a standardized way using Ridesheet, and then you can swap out Ridesheet for another tool where that uses the same standard. And this is where the beauty of standards really comes in. It's like, well, Ridesheet adheres to the standard. As long as another tool also adheres to the standard, then you can kind of remove Ridesheet, put in the other piece of software, and you may need to make some tweaks, but you're not starting from scratch. And so that's a really, I think, great possibility for Ridesheet, is that sort of testing phase for a larger coordination scheme.
So we do have a few questions in the Q&A, so I'd be remiss if we don't address those. But as we kind of close this formal panel discussion, you know, one of my questions to the ladies, in terms of, are there any plans to expand or coordinate with other providers in the area? And this could be transportation providers. Kevin mentioned, you know, other types of organizations. Kind of what, as this is blossoming in your organization, what's kind of a next carrot, or kind of a, you know, a carrot in terms of coordination from your opinion? And Linda, Andrea, Missy can address that, and we can address some questions in the Q&A box.
Well, I would just state that, yes, we do plan to coordinate with Missy and her crew up in the northern part of our county, because we just have the two providers in our area, and the area is large, as you see, but we were already kind of doing little bits of coordination in, you know, with multiple phone calls or texts or this sort of way. And Ridesheet then helps transfer the information. Well, it will transfer the information efficiently and correctly without a whole bunch of, like I said, calls, etc. We at the Lake County Senior Citizens Association just felt like it was such an important piece to it, because our county is so large, we are so rural, and we know that oftentimes driving north, we're driving right past Missy and her organization and riders along the way. So if we can better use the funds that are coming into our county, you know, we're not there yet, but it's a goal to coordinate and share trips and share the expense.
Absolutely.
Right now, we are the only, Missy and our transportation's the only ones in Lake County. We don't have Uber, we don't have taxis, we don't have a bus, we have nothing. So when you have someone who has been discharged from the hospital, you know, say they went by ambulance and now they need to get home, and how are they going to do that? We have people who have been released from prison and I need to get back to somewhere. We have coordinated with our crisis center. We have had women or battered persons who need to get out of town. We have coordinated with them, not officially on any ride sheet or anything like that, but it's nice to be able to, on our part of the ride sheet, be able to distinguish where that ride came from and how we are helping the county. You know, the ultimately is we're fulfilling and trying to remove the transportation barriers. And I think we're doing that. And with Ridesheet, we can keep track of what we're doing, which is nice.
We've got several, and I hope we can get to them all, but I don't know, depending on the responses. But the first question says, how does the project work from the transit provider end? And I know you all have talked a little bit about this, but they specifically wanted to know, does the nonprofits need to know any code language? I'd love to hear the nonprofit's perspective on what the tool is. And you talked a little bit about the tool, Kevin, from your perspective, but if you want to highlight that, I don't want to elaborate on the question any more than I have, but I don't know who wants to address that.
Well, I can say as a layman, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a whiz of any sort. But if you've ever worked with spreadsheets, if you've ever worked with Excel, or as Kevin has said, Lotus 123, any of that, or if you just are open-minded enough, you can manipulate Ridesheet to do just about whatever you want. I sometimes sometimes I will want to know how many rides a particular rider had or driver had. I don't want to have to go count 1, 2, 3. I want to be able to hit the cell, say sort and find, and bam, I've got a number. And it doesn't alter your original, your original ride sheet. So user friendly, I just could really encourage anyone who is open-minded enough to at least learn it very quickly. You will find how helpful it is for all kinds of questions you need to answer. And that's what's made it nice. It's not a boxed program to where you can't touch anything. You just, this is what you get and this is what you get. You can get what you want out of Ridesheet. And that's been very helpful.
No, that's great. The fact that you can manipulate to suit your needs. And I apologize, audience. I'm getting text chats that my volume is low, so I do apologize. There's nothing I can do on my end. So hopefully you can go back and listen to the recording and just blast me. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question. How is a TDS data entered into Google Sheets checked for accuracy before it is shared with others? Are there data control measures? You want to take that, Kevin? You're on mute.
Yeah, I can answer that. So there are data control measures. So a lot of the data is checked as it's entered. So if somebody enters an address that it can't geolocate, it flags you. And we're working on, I think where data can get bad is something we discover as we work with the tool. So if the pickup time is after the drop-off time, if times get reversed or something, we're building in checks for that. And then the data to be shared, there will basically, you have to specific flag say, I am sharing this trip. I want you to know that this trip is something that I want you to take a look at and pick up if you can. So I think there's going to be a user entry of like, yes, this is really what I want to be sending to the other agency. And then there will be a layer of data checking in the exchange itself to make sure that there's nothing wonky going on.
Thank you. Next question. Does Ridesheet help the two nonprofits coordinate rides? I believe the area they work in is pretty rural. So could this tool create cost savings with shared rides?
Absolutely.
That is
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Very much so.
That is the goal. We all want to save a little bit of money, right?
Right.
Question to the Lake County folks. How many trips in Lake County do you provide every year or per year?
Gosh, annually. We do about, in miles, we do about 17 to 18,000 miles a month. And rides, I have it by funding, so I don't actually have a total, but it's over 100. I don't know, Andrea, if we have a little better number.
not right in front of me.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm sorry. We are working 5 days a week, and our drivers and our vehicles are out every day. So we're busy. We are busy.
What are your hours over at the senior center?
Our hours,
Is it business?
our business hours of operation with COVID are 9 to 2 for the center itself, but availability for driving, we drive actually, we have right now a sleep study. She's got to go in at 7 tonight. She gets out at 6 in the morning. We'll be there for her to do it. So we don't have a time constraint. We do whatever the doctors want. We are encouraging our people to, instead of just going to the receptionist and saying, I need an appointment in Portland, in 2 weeks. And the receptionist simply looks and says, oh, I've got one at 8 a.m. And the people say, okay, that's great. That means we leave at 2 a.m. So we really encourage and we participate with our riders, to be a little bit proactive in that they tell the receptionist, it's probably not locked in stone when their appointment has to be. So that has helped. But we're available. We have left at 3 in the morning several times.
Wow. Any response over at Intercourt in terms of your rides per year?
I honestly don't have that in front of me either.
They put you on the spot.
Can I give an estimate, Linda, based
You
on,
can,
Yes, please.
we were just talking reporting earlier this week. So I come up with for April on the order of 360 odd trips.
That would sound right.
Yeah, and then the mileage across all that is close to 1,700 miles. So
1,000.
just to give you a sense of the
that's
kind
the
of
year through April.
that
That's
is
the-
1 month. That's April
Oh,
alone.
that's 1 month solely. Okay.
Yeah, so multiply that out. But yeah, that's the kind of distances that we're talking, for that many trips. So, so there's money to be saved with coordination, but it's also, I think, because the resources are so thin, spread across so much territory, I think it's also a matter of whether the trip happens,
Right.
like whether people just get less access.
Yeah.
If the community knows that, oh, anytime that a Lake County bus is going up to Bend, that there's a way to know that, and we increase the visibility of that, then the likelihood of people getting on that bus is going to grow, right? And so it's not just about saving money, but it's actually about increasing access. And I think that's the kind of target that we're reaching for here. And so, we're continuing to experiment as we get these systems so that they're really working internally. The linking becomes really easy, and then I think there's also opportunities to start to put it out to the public in different ways. We want to be careful about how we do that so that we're not sort of making promises we can't keep. But there's a lot of opportunity here because we're building the base in sort of a web-enabled world. The next stages become a lot easier.
That kind of addressed the next question. Someone was asking if there was a demo of how Ridesheet works, if that was available, even still a work in progress. So as Kevin just mentioned, it is a work in progress, but hopefully I even know that there were some inquiries from the webinar on Tuesday about this software. So we will certainly keep you abreast. So next question, is Ridesheet similar to a GTFS development tool? If yes, how are folks training and how to work with Ridesheet?
So GTFS is the General Transit Feed Specification, and it is another data standard related to transit. It is basically sort of like a declaration of fixed route services. You can create this file and then Google Maps or other entities consume it, and it's like, this is what the service looks like. The bus goes down this road, it goes every half hour at these times, and here's how much it will cost to get on. And it's really sort of the basic GTFS thing is this sort of static file that you can kind of not unlike it's sort of an electronic computable readable version of a bus schedule. Demand responsive transportation doesn't work like that. We never know when the bus is going to be coming. So it is a data specification like the GTFS is the TDS is a specification like the GTFS is a specification, but it's about specific trips that are being requested.
Mhm.
Like I need to go from here to here on this day at this time, and can you do that? And then yes or no. Yes, we can do it. We can just, if you can leave half an hour early, it's that kind. It's a data specification for describing that scenario, not a fixed route scenario. So the GTFS is growing and expanding. There's a new extension called GTFS Flex, which is meant to be able to describe more flexible services, like what Lake County does. And that will kind of tie in. I think there'll be sort of like connection points between the TDS and these new GTFS extensions. But they're meant to handle different situations. So they're related but separate.
I know we've got just a couple of minutes before the end of the session. I wanted to see if I can get a couple more questions in. So I do know this question is probably for down the road, since you all are still in kind of the development implementation phase, but where does Ridesheet sit at the dispatcher manager office on your computers? And what tool or device do drivers use in order to access Ridesheet, or when that happens?
I could address that if you'd like. It is on the computer, and we do have, it's in a spreadsheet type form. It's up on my screen all the time. There's also a calendar that can be generated from it for each driver. We're still tweaking on that, but communication is, a manifest is produced for a day or two ahead, and then we email that or share that with the drivers. Some drivers, as Missy has said, they're seniors and they don't want to look at anything. So I take a picture with my phone and I text message them the manifest. But with that manifest, it has pickup time, drop off time, what vehicle you're going to be in. There's a dog, be careful, whatever, directions, whatever is on that one glance sheet of paper. So the phone calls back and forth and the questions are eliminated. It took a little while for everybody to get comfortable with that, but 100% the drivers are on board now. They're all using it. They want it. They are mad if they don't get it quick enough. And they're looking for it. So that has been very positive moving forward, rather than the kick and dirt and I don't want this stupid thing. I know what I'm doing. And it's different now. They want it. So that's been great. That's been great. So that I hope answers the question.
Well, that's good news. Feel it comes up, but they say, well, we are at 3:31 actually, and I want to first take my hats off to each and every one of you. Thank you, panelists, for being here, for sharing your expertise and your experience with this Ridesheet software. Thank you, Jana, for your participation and your presence on this webinar as well. Heather Edmonds has supplied a link in the chat to an evaluation for this session. So please, we invite you and welcome you to fill that out whenever you get a chance, hopefully before the end of the week if you can. And then lastly, we do have some resources that will be made available to you when we send out the slides and the recording of this webinar. So these are just some additional resources, but all of this will be sent out to you, the recording and all of the slides. And so with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for, again, your attention, and have a great afternoon.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.